So we lost America. We lost China. We're losing the European Union. Now Mexico. Will dangle a carrot in front of your nose and tell you that everything's good and beneficial. Canada's going to be this number one economy when it shoots itself in the foot time and time again.
Disrupt America that I fought.
Weird thing to happen. Get this. According to the Financial Times, China's new canola tariffs heightens trade tensions with Canada. Preliminary 76% duty marks escalation after Beijing applied levies on the sector in March. So, Canada is not making any winnable strides in this trade war battle. It has shot itself in the foot numerous times. Mark Carney, who pledged himself as being this master negotiator, people idolize him as being this guy that was going to take on someone like Donald Trump, shot himself in the foot numerous times, has not done any beneficial work for trade here in Canada and for the business sector as a whole. And it just seems like every single notion of actually sitting down and negotiating new contracts, new trade agreements with these countries just doesn't seem to happen in this country. And it's doing damages to these sectors, to the agricultural sector that grows canola. And now with China putting their restrictions, putting their restraints on Canadian goods like canola and steel, that's going to further damage the economy and further damage our prosperity of actually negotiating and facilitating a strong economy through proper trade agreements. But Mark Carney just doesn't seem to be interested in this. So according to the Financial Times here, China has launched new anti-dumping duties on Canadian canola in an escalation of trade tensions between Beijing and Ottawa that has pushed down future prices on fears of supply glut. China's Commerce Minister announced on Tuesday that a preliminary 75.8% duty on Canadian canola seed would go into effect on Thursday, sending the crop's futures on the Intercontinental Exchange down as much as 6.5%. China has always exercised prudence and restraint when using trade remedies to safeguard fair and free trade, said a spokesperson at the Chinese embassy in Ottawa. China will take necessary measures to resolutely safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of domestic industries. The move follows duties Beijing imposed on Canadian canola meal and oil in March of this year and comes as part of a probe launched last September. Canada had 10 days to submit written comments to the investigation, China's Commerce Minister said. Canada's International Trade Minister, Mandir Sindhu, and Trade Minister Keith MacDonald said in a joint statement late on Tuesday that they were deeply disappointed with China's decision. We do not dump canola. Our hard-working farmers provide world-class food to Canadians and international trading partners, they said. Canada is committed to ensuring fair market access for our canola industry, and we remain ready to engage in constructive dialogue with Chinese officials to address our respective trade concerns. Well, from an observational point, I could tell you that that's not happening, that we are not coming to the play of negotiating with China. We're not willing to reach out and have a conversation. And all that we are doing is making ourselves worse by adding reciprocal tariffs onto China. And it's just causing devastation, causing further rift of two countries that could easily negotiate. Just like we're doing with America. We could easily sit down, negotiate a trade system that benefits the majority of our country and America and Mexico, but we're just not doing it. We're not doing it. Why? Because the Canadian government, in their mission to control supply, as I said, there's a supply glut. And we know this because farmers know about the supply glut. That this commission is hammering down. It's the middleman between the farmers and the government, demanding that if farmers overproduce product, and we've seen this with dairy farmers, that they overproduce product, instead of selling it at a cheaper rate that they could be doing, they're dumping down. They're dumping milk down the drain that could be sold to grocery stores, sold to farms, could be sold elsewhere for a cheaper rate. They're doing that purposely to keep supply management afloat. So China's not wrong on this. China's not wrong to point out that the supply management goons that are controlling the agriculture system are making it impossible. And that's affecting both their country and it's affecting our industry as a whole. But the Canadian government is gaslighting you, telling you that we're in conference talks with them, that, well, we're doing everything we can to help support the farmers. So here's CBC Watcher pointing this out. The canola industry generates more than $40 billion annually and employs 200,000 people. Saskatchewan's premier says that's bigger than the steel, aluminum, and auto industry combined. Scott Moe, that's the premier, quotes, "I would say that they deserve the same attention by our federal government and our prime minister as we are seeing in other industries, all to protect a non-existent Canadian EV industry and curry favor with the United States." So this is in part, a lot of this trade tension is in part because the Canadian government is stubborn when it comes to the EV market. They put tariffs onto Chinese-made cars, hoping that the EV market would appear in Canada. And every notion that they tried to build an EV market in this country has failed. All the battery plants that they've claimed that they are going to start operating and they're going to build and manufacture have fell down the drain. Either the companies went bankrupt, the contracts got breached, whatever the case may be, it isn't working. And they're putting more harsher penalties on the China EV market, which they're benefiting and booming from. You can get a Chinese electric vehicle for under 10 grand. That's pretty impressive. Whereas here in Canada, we're not improving. We're not innovating. We're completely shooting ourselves in the foot numerous times over and over again with this trade war. And it just seems like an absolute clown circus instead of actually sitting down, negotiating, and coming to a resolution. So here's a little news piece about farm workers being affected by this.
In 2024, Canada exported $5 billion of canola to China. To justify its actions, China said that after conducting an investigation, it found that Canada was providing its farmers with unfair subsidies. This escalation has its roots in the former Liberal government's decision to impose tariffs on electric vehicles.
We will be introducing a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles.
The previous government in Ottawa had done this to align its policy on China with that of Washington, but we didn't get any brownie points.
The canola industry generates more than $40 billion annually and employs 200,000 people. Saskatchewan's premier says that's bigger than the steel, aluminum, and auto industry combined.
Canola producers hit with these Chinese tariffs, I would say that they deserve the same attention by our federal government and our prime minister as we're seeing in other industries.
In 2024, Canada exported.
So that's CTV News Channel reporting on the fact that this is deeply affecting farmers. And particularly in Saskatchewan, because Saskatchewan has a huge farming industry. The same way that Alberta, every time we screw over the energy industry and put a no pipelines bill or enact any measures to go after our energy sector, that hits primarily Alberta because they have the large energy infrastructure. Same with Saskatchewan with farmers. Same with Ontario with the automotive industry, which is also being affected by this. Because all of our auto plants that employ people that have generated cars in the past are being undermined by this falsified claim that we're going to start manufacturing electric vehicles. and that we're going to put a mandate onto people, and that this EV market is going to transform the country. There's just one problem. We don't have the infrastructure to do that. And we'll never have the infrastructure to do that because here in Canada, it's kind of impossible to have electric vehicles in a climate setting where it gets ridiculously cold in the winter. It's kind of hard to have that. It's kind of hard to implement electric vehicles when you don't even have the energy grid necessary to build these battery facilities. It's kind of hard to do that. China's able to do that because China actually invests into their country. They actually take all the revenue and growth from their GDP, from their manufacturing, from everything, and put it back into those industries. Canada doesn't do any of that. They claim that they do. They claim that they benefit the industries of agriculture and automotive and the energy sectors, but they don't. They personally don't. And it's mostly because of the Liberal Party's stubbornness. You just saw Justin Trudeau there implementing a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs into the false claim that Canada is going to become an electric vehicle manufacturing hub that just never comes to be. So this is just degrading more and more of our country. Here's this table salt. Watch, Canadian canola farmers are struggling during this trade war with the U.S. and China. And because they aren't from Eastern Canada, no one cares about them. So here, this is a farmer in Saskatchewan that's already felt the devastation and pain done by the neglect of our governments, completely undermining farming industry, which is one of the oldest professions of mankind. And this guy is pleading out to the governments that now with this trade war, it's completely, utterly devastating to the farming industry.
It's all I've ever done. So if you ever have the thought that crosses my mind where maybe it's not financially viable, of course that's stressful. Whenever there's an issue like that with one of the main importers of canola, it's obviously going to have an effect on the price, which then in turn affects us. Because when we grow a crop like this, that's expensive to grow, and we've got it to a point where we have the maximum amount of dollars put into this crop, and then an announcement like that just essentially dropped 50 cents a bushel right off the top. Right with that announcement, and who knows what it'll do over the next month or two or however long this lasts. The timing was essentially the worst time for us. Canola was a decent price. We've pre-sold a little bit, but not a whole lot, because we didn't want to overextend ourselves. Essentially, we wanted to wait until we saw what type of crop we had. So we're not as protected as I would have hoped, but we didn't necessarily see this coming. So how do you protect against something that you don't know is about to happen, type of thing? It requires a lot of fertilizer. Fertilizer prices are higher. The tariffs have an effect on them. The seed's expensive. The chemical to make sure the field stays essentially weed and pest free is expensive. Machinery is expensive. Just essentially our costs across the board have increased rapidly in the last 5 years, and the price of canola is not kept in step with that. And then add U.S. tariff pressure and now the Chinese tariff pressure, it's a downward trend on the price and an upward trend on the costs, and it's essentially not a great situation. Like, just for instance, urea prices today are $800 a ton, and not that long ago I paid $350 a ton. So when your fertilizer price doubles, and the price of canola at that time was probably $11 or $12, and now today it's $13.50, $14. So fertilizer's doubled, and canola's gone up, call it 20% since then. The cost line and the revenue line are starting to match, and that's not great for longevity. You're concerned about, will you have enough money to operate in the future? Yeah, it's like every other small business. When the revenue and the expenses are starting to amount to about the same. It makes everything more difficult, and when you add difficulty in a business that you're into as deep as we are into farming, like of course it's stressful.
So it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that these are people. This is why I have such a huge amount of respect for, farmers, people that work in that industry. Not only because your business is feeding us, your business is providing agriculture and food. Maybe not canola, because we know canola oil is pretty bad for you. But it's affecting all sorts of farmers. It's not just canola. It's the whole entire industry is collapsing because of everything they said there. And he said it's no different than any other small business. And with more and more of these tariffs, do you think that's benefiting small businesses in Canada? After what we witnessed during COVID, after the mangled mess, the fact that 7 in 10 businesses in Toronto alone were forcibly shut down and never reopened, that now you want to do this tariff circus and want to beat out your chest and say how strong I am and how Canada's going to be this #1 economy when it shoots itself in the foot time and time again? Do you think that's going to have a hopeful future for us? And do you think that if the farming goes away, that's beneficial for Canada? One of our biggest resources is agricultural land. The prairies rely on this. The same way that energy is Alberta's reliability. And same way with steel is reliable for Canada. Canada's a very resource-rich nation and has a lot of benefit and has a lot of potential. But because the stubborn and heinousness and neglect of our governments, and I say that across the board for not just the federal government, but all the premiers as well, that have neglected the need to build this strong labor force, to build upon our economy, to innovate and build upon Canada to become a reliable country that countries can turn towards and we can actually negotiate. We are just in a downward spiral, in a constant downward spiral. And while America is making headway with negotiations with the European Union, they're making headway negotiating with China, it looks like. Where have we been? Where have we been? Because we're not settling the score with China right now. We're not going to there, or China coming here to negotiate new agreements that could ease off on the tariffs. We're not negotiating with America because Mark Carney's just being stubborn to even have a conversation with Donald Trump. Like I said, the whole thing just seems like an absolute circus. That all we had to do was come to the table, negotiate, hammer something out, and then you had some sort of solution. And if there's something in flaw, if there's something wrong with that, then you hammer out a counter proposal. And then you negotiate and further negotiate. That's business. That's life. That's how you do politics. And much like how the Canadian government is snubbing the airline workers at Air Canada by failing to negotiate with them, they're failing to negotiate on the behalf of Canadians. And that's what's leaving this farmer, much like a lot of farmers, much like a lot of small businesses that are being affected by the tariffs, high and dry, that they don't know what to do. They don't know that they have a future anymore because of this uncertainty. And while Mark Carney will dangle a carrot in front of your nose and tell you that everything's good and beneficial and that we're doing everything we can to help you, this is the reality. This is the reality. That they're undermining these people. The people that are claimed to be essential by government officials. Now those same people are being completely bombarded by this trade war insanity that could be easily resolved if we actually got together and negotiate something. Actually come together as people and work something out. And to make the final point that Canada's just continuing in a downward spiral, we lost Mexico. So we lost America. We lost China. We're losing the European Union. Now Mexico. Claudia Scheinbaum says no need for bilateral trade deal with Canada. So who do we have left? Who do we have left that we can actually have a conversation, that we can actually build upon our economy and do something grateful? Because we're not doing it for ourselves. We're not doing any beneficial work for our industries and for the workers. And we're not doing any beneficial work for other countries. So, who is this helping? What's this trade war really helping in the long run?